Welcome back. Eyes closed, hands raised, lights dim, the music swells. And the lyrics say something like, I just want to be close to you. I just want to feel your presence. Hold me. I need you. You are all I want. It sounds spiritual. It feels emotional. And in that moment, it genuinely moves people. But step back and ask an honest question. If you removed the word God from those lyrics, would they sound like a worship song or a love song to a romantic partner? Because increasingly in modern church culture, the answer is you genuinely cannot tell the difference. This is not a small stylistic concern, it is a theological one, because the way we sing shapes what we believe, and when worship language consistently frames God as a romantic partner whose primary function is to make us feel emotionally fulfilled, it quietly replaces the God of the Bible with something much smaller and much more self-centered. Look at how the Bible actually describes encountering God. In Isaiah 6, the prophet sees the Lord seated on his throne, seraphim surrounding him, crying, Holy, holy, holy. The doorposts shake, the temple fills with smoke, and Isaiah's response in verse 5 is not, I just want to be close to you. It is, Woe to me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Woe to me, I am ruined. That is what a genuine encounter with the holiness of God looks like in Scripture. Not goosebumps, not romantic warmth, overwhelming undana in the presence of something infinitely greater than yourself. In Revelation 1, John sees the risen Jesus in his glory, and verse 17 says, When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, not moved to tears, not feeling warm and close, falling as a dead man before the weight of divine glory. In Exodus 33, Moses begs God to show him his glory, and God tells him, No human being can see my face and live. Moses gets a glimpse of God's back, and he comes down from the mountain with his face literally glowing so radiant that the people could not look at him directly. That is the God of Scripture, transcendent, holy, consuming, magnificent, a God before whom the appropriate initial response is not intimacy but does the Bible also speak of closeness with God? Absolutely. Psalm 73 verse 28 says, But as for me, it is good to be near God. James 4 verse 8 says, Come near to God and he will come near to you. Jesus calls his disciples friends in John 15. Paul describes the Spirit crying, Abba, Father, from within believers in Romans 8. There is genuine intimacy in the biblical relationship between God and humanity that is real and should not be dismissed. But biblical intimacy with God is not the same as romantic sentimentality. Yes, Scripture beautifully refers to the church corporate as the bride of Christ, but that is a grand cosmic reality of covenantal faithfulness, not a license for individualistic romantic sentimentality. The intimacy of a child with a father is not the same as the intimacy of two romantic partners. The intimacy of a servant who has been called friend by a king is not the same as a relationship between equals seeking emotional fulfillment from each other. The distinction matters, because when those lines blur, God stops being God and starts being a cosmic emotional support system whose primary job is to make you feel good. And if we're being completely honest with ourselves, many of us have mistaken an emotional high for spiritual maturity, but that theology produces a deeply fragile faith. When worship is primarily about feeling close, feeling moved, feeling the presence, what happens when the feeling stops? When the music ends and the lights come up and the emotional high fades? When life gets hard and God feels distant and the goosebumps are gone? People whose faith is built on emotional experience collapse when the experience changes, because they were never worshipping the God of Isaiah 6. They were worshipping a feeling, and feelings are unreliable foundations. Proverbs 14 verse 12 says, There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Worship that feels right is not automatically worship that is right. The fear of the Lord, a concept that appears over 300 times in Scripture, has almost completely disappeared from modern worship culture, and that loss is not a small thing. Proverbs 9 verse 10 says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Not the feeling of the Lord, the fear of the Lord, a profound grounding awareness of who God actually is, His holiness, His power, His absolute sovereignty that produces reverence, humility, and a life genuinely oriented around Him rather than around your own emotional needs. That is the foundation real worship is supposed to be built on, and you cannot build it on songs that turn the Almighty into a boyfriend. This is not an argument against emotion in worship. The Psalms are full of emotions like joy, grief, longing, praise, despair. Emotion belongs in worship. But there is a difference between emotion that flows from encountering the real God and emotionalism that is engineered by production value and lyrical sentimentality to create a feeling that gets mistaken for encounter. One changes you, the other just feels like it does. Worship the God of Isaiah, the God of Revelation, the God before whom seraphim cover their faces, the God whose back Moses could not even look at directly. Let that God move you. Let that God undo you. Let that God produce in you something deeper than warm feelings and temporary goosebumps. That is worship, and it is far more powerful than anything a romantic lyric can manufacture. True worship doesn't reduce God to fit our emotions. It expands our souls to fit His majesty. If this perspective challenged the way you think about the songs we sing on Sundays, let's start an honest, respectful conversation in the comments below. Have you noticed this shift in your own church communities? Let's pursue truth over performance together. Consider subscribing if you want to keep exploring what authentic faith looks like.